Hi, everyone. This is Mark Lynd, and I'm here today with Paul Degraff from SailPoint. He's a senior identity strategist. And we're going to be talking today about identity and some of the things and some of the trends that are going on, what we are expecting to see in the future, and some of the challenges and what they're able to do with SailPoint to do some amazing things around identity and identity governance. Hi, Paul. How are you today?
Very good. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Well, obviously, in your role, there's a lot going on around identity and identity governance, and that kind of leads me to the first question to kick it off is, what do you think is the biggest challenge for identity in the identity space at the moment?
Yeah, so I think coming out of this pandemic, a lot of people have been doing their digital transformation overnight, you may say. And with that, they've been enabling access left, right, and center, right? Cloud adoption has skyrocketed. So with that, people are now, a year later, beginning to realize that, all that enablement was great, but is that actually done in a secure fashion? And do people actually have the access that they have? So what we're beginning to see is that customers are coming towards us and saying, hey, we've done all this enablement, but did we do that the right way? And did we leave any open doors, or did we give too much access? And that's definitely what we're seeing as we start engaging with new customers that, they may have opened the door a little bit too wide. And so that's good for us in that perspective, that we can give them that level of visibility. But really, where during the pandemic, it was all like, let's get people access from home to services and everything else. But now it's kind of like, hey, it's all good and well, but let's get it back under control. So that's one of the main things we're seeing now, is that people are sort of taking a step back and say, hey, it was nice that we did all that enablement, but did we actually do that in a secure fashion?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned secure. So, what effect it really, I'm sure it has had a big effect with cybersecurity and ransomware. What effect have they had on identity governance and identity as a whole?
Yeah, so what we're seeing, I mean, if you read some of the security breach reports that are out there, right, and you see sort of numbers like 70 to 90% of breaches are related to some kind of compromise of an identity or an account, right? And
Makes
then
sense.
if you dig deeper, then they actually say that it was preventable, kind of, which is even more scarier, kind of, if you will. So I see it kind of like back in the old days, or not so much old days, but back in the day when you sort of, there was a breach and then it was related to that somebody didn't patch, right? So I call it all kind of, when I used to be in the CISO role, sort of the hygiene that needed to occur. And you see that the same thing on the identity side, that we're not really doing good on our hygiene, on keeping systems up to date and making sure that when people leave the organization, that their access is shut down, or really understanding who has access to what. So that's one of the biggest things that we're seeing from customers, that they, with this explosion of cloud solutions and access all over the place, is that they really lost track on who has access to what. So people really are looking for that 360 degree of visibility into access.
Yeah, I would guess that with the remote work, rise of remote work, and with the sudden scale and speed, that has had, and its impact on cybersecurity with larger attack surface, more threat vectors. I'm sure that's also had a pretty large impact on the identity governance.
Yeah, absolutely. Really see identity extending now to, cloud visibility, to files, with the adoption of sort of all these cloud file storage systems that are out there, the boxes and the Dropboxes and Google, and all that collaboration that went on. You see the shift from security where, IT used to control the security, but now it's the user, right, that is sharing
Mhm.
documents and setting these permissions. And with that, we sort of, open up the floodgates a little bit, because the average user doesn't fully understand necessarily, when they say give access to everybody, what that everybody actually is, kind of, if you will. So we definitely see identity extending into sort of data access governance, but into cloud governance as well. So really to round out that view that people need to have, and that's becoming a big thing for customers to get that under control.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of insider threat action going on, negative actions going on during the pandemic or remote work, because people have, like you mentioned, they have all of a sudden have all this access. There's all this going on, and there's so much going on. I think it's hard for, unless they have a product like SailPoint, to be able to really, watch the governance and understand who has access to what, and what impact it's having on the organization.
Yeah, also changes just because you work from home, the policy may change, right? Just because you're now on your home computer, should you really have the same access as if you were in the office?
Mm.
Because your home computer may not have the same controls on there. It may not have an antivirus solutions or, uh, some of the newer capabilities that are out there that you see on endpoints. Kind of, so all of a sudden you see a difference of risk level coming into an organization by allowing a personal computer to connect, right? And should that person still have access to a financial system and do financial transactions? Probably not. Kind of. So the decision has to be made more in a contextual or arrangement than just, hey, I can have access to a financial system regardless of where I'm coming from.
Right, right. That makes sense. So for those in the audience that aren't totally familiar with SailPoint, maybe they've heard about it or they know a little bit about identity or identity governance. What are some of the innovations or some of the key elements that SailPoint uses to really impact that and help these organizations do their identity governance?
Yeah, on innovation for us, particularly kind of, sort of prior to joining SailPoint about 6 months ago, I was one of their customers. Kind of, so I've been using their innovation quite heavily, if you will.
Well, that's great.
But one of the key features is really how artificial intelligence and machine learning can really address identity governance, really enhance the capabilities there, kind of, right? So I was one of the early adopters of that technology, and really could see how it can scale to a level that a human just can't be. There's just so much data kind of that's coming out of there. So having really enabling people, for example, there is this thing called access certification that sort of came from the compliance world, where managers have to review access of their employees, and that's such a burden on managers to do that. So why wouldn't you use AI or ML to do that, and let sort of 80 or 90% sort of have these decisions made by the system itself and just deal with exceptions, right? So the best way I refer is the innovation you see that coming from us as well, is sort of the Tesla self-driving car, I would say. So it's kind of like, how do we move to self-governance, kind of, right? Let the
Right.
system determine whether it's the right way to do it, with, of course, the right guardrails, the right algorithm in place. But let the system take care of it. It can do it far better than any human potentially can. And you take away that fatigue in the organization and let managers just deal with the exceptions, as I call it, kind of. So whether that's new access or something has changed roles and things like that. So really what I see is that AI and ML can bring so much benefit to an organization to streamline their IGA process. So for me, that's one of the big things. I'm a bit of a math geek, so it aligns with that as well, kind
Sure.
of, if you will. So I think that's one of the most interesting innovations, and sort of help organizations just do a lot better and faster.
So, I mean, we're seeing AI and ML really have an impact on cybersecurity, because to your point, that nobody has enough resources to be able to handle all the things that are going on. And you move from commercial to public sector, and they even have less resources and are more budget constrained. From that perspective, if they're using SailPoint and they're starting to use these different features, as well as starting to start to use these innovations to help them manage their environments and have a better security posture. Are they, is it really top of mind for them, identity and identity governance? And if so, how do they reap the value? And are you seeing that as kind of a trend, more of a move to identity? Because I'm definitely seeing more of a move to identity with zero trust and some of the advanced version of NIST and some of the things going on there.
Yeah, no, we definitely see that that people are having it at the top of mind, right? I mean, as I said earlier, just because of the outcome of the pandemic, were people being over provisioned, but not just that, right? If I look at myself, I had the pleasure of implementing SailPoint twice. One with their earlier technology, and secondly with their cloud technology. Um, Initially, going back to the late 2000s, it was all compliance driven, right? We just came out of the Enron debacle, you came out of the financial
Right.
crisis, and it was all about making sure that people indeed weren't over provisioned, didn't still had access to the system that they needed. And auditors were really banging on the door of every company, so that was in some kind of regulated industry, to say, hey, you need to establish these kind of processes. And today that's still very much true. But what I see more, especially in the company that I worked prior, we were all about automation and day one productivity. So how can you enable day one productivity, right? So when a new employee comes in, that they get the access that they want, kind of, and need to do their job, not that they sit there twiddling their thumbs for a week before they can be productive, right? Especially if you think of contractors that you hired, in the beginning when we first implemented that, it probably took a week or 2 weeks before people had access that they needed. And, when we finally had a program together, I mean, people had 80, 90% of their access in day one, and that was just tremendous, kind of. And that's where the cost is, right? So having people sitting around doing nothing is not very productive. So I think there's a change happening where people really look at from a productivity point of view and a control point of view, rather than just that compliance thing. Compliance is still important, but you see more people looking at the productivity benefits they're going to get out of these systems, and then the visibility that these systems provide.
Yeah, that's interesting. We hear about visibility all the time, simplifying and more visibility, right? AI, ML, across cybersecurity, not just identity. There's a lot of trends that are similar. So if you think it like that, and obviously there's a lot of lessons been learned during the pandemic, and some of the things that we're required to do, to keep these businesses and organizations moving at a fast pace, at great scale. What do you think are some innovations over the next 2 to 3 years in the identity governance space that'll really have an impact on customers?
Yeah, I come back to sort of this self-governance model, right? So as we see more and more capabilities coming based on AI, ML, but really driving more of a self-driving car. I hate to say it that way, but it
Love
seems
that
to resonate the
analogy.
most. It seems to resonate the most with customers that I talk to. Just setting those guardrails and let the system take care of itself, kind of, more than anything else. And I think you will see more and more of that, but also with the automation that's coming, as people adopt cloud infrastructure and whatever, everything there is automated, right? One of
Mhm.
the trends that I've seen, the company that I worked with prior, was like we used to have all these separation of duties with the network guy, the infrastructure guy, the app guy, and now there's just this one cloud engineer that does it all, right?
Right.
So how do you put this control in place in an automated fashion, kind of, if you will, to to simulate that separation of duty, if you will, kind of. So SOD controls, and I see more and more of governance will have to go into automation technologies as well, so that DevOps and those kind of practices can interface with an IGA system, so that they stay within the guardrails. So I think that's one of the key features we need to deliver on, is to really build those integrations, not just security wise, but also from a governance perspective. So that's a big one. The other thing that I see in the cloud is, just because of this immutable nature of the cloud, the service is there, the service is gone, kind of, the need for audit records and auditability is becoming more and
Mhm.
more needed, kind of. So what we see and what we've built and going to extend on that quite a bit is, I call it the DVR of access, kind of, if you will.
That's another
You
good
know,
analogy. Yeah.
yeah, you kind of, when, as you well know, if there's a security breach, it never happened right now, right? It was always a week ago, a couple of days ago, or an event happened. You always have to go back in time. So being able sort of to turn the DVR knob back to a particular time and say, what was the access that people had at that particular time, or what does this account have access to, is key, right? To be able to do that, because of just the rapid change of the cloud will bring that to you, kind of. So we're actively looking at these kind of capabilities, and steering us in the right direction, so we help our customers be able to support that.
How has obviously the cloud is a big top of mind, a big momentum gather out there, both on the customer and the manufacturer side. Um, the move to the cloud, is there some things that SailPoint does that really impact the customer from that? I mean, sometimes you hear about we have an entire cloud strategy, or we're just really focused on helping the customers get to the cloud and be productive and safe in the cloud.
No, so our cloud offering is there kind of. We have multiple cloud offerings, so both from an IGA perspective, um, not the way I described it back in the day was sort of like not many companies get to rebuild the product, right? So we had an on-premise product that was very customizable and very nice. I implemented that, it was great, did everything it did. But when I had a chance to relook at that, many years later, would I do that again? And I sort of worked for a cloud first company, so we went with the cloud thing. And one of the main differences was that it was I like the KISS methodology, keep it simple, and it was really very simple to implement. Didn't need a lot of support, so it just makes sense for people to really evaluate these cloud solutions. And then we extended that with sort of a cloud solution that really gives visibility into the cloud, and those are now connected, so you can have a real more and more visibility into what the cloud is actually doing, what those cloud resources are, and who has access to it. So really, we really want to build out that 360 view of an identity and what they have access to. So for us, the cloud, we really help people see into the cloud. Maybe that may be a bit of
Right.
a bold statement, but it's really that kind of right. Really give them that visibility that they're lacking, because most customers will tell you that they lost track of the cloud a little bit if they're honest. Right? So we're trying to rebuild that trust again and giving customers the visibility and take the remedial activities that have occurred. Right? We've seen security breaches related to Amazon S3 buckets being publicly accessible or other things like that that we can definitely help them with resolving.
Yeah, it's funny. We're seeing a lot of customers ask for, along the KISS line where it's simple and easy, but also gives you kind of that 360 view. I love the way you kind of mentioned that and gave that analogy. Are there any really great customer success stories that you can kind of touch on or talk about? Maybe you don't have to necessarily mention the customer's name, but maybe something they had a specific challenge and they solved it with SailPoint. Maybe when you were there, what you did before.
Yeah, I mean, our success story was really just getting to that day one access and being able to give people access day one, and also put control back into the user. Kind of, and what I mean with that, SailPoint offers a lot of self-service capabilities where if you can automate it, say for example, the example that I usually give is this. So I like my Mac kind of, but Microsoft Visio doesn't work on a Mac kind of, right? So
Right.
there is an equivalent product for that. That's not something that you give to the whole organization. There's no automation, but you can build a request model for that, kind of with
Right.
approvals, et cetera, et cetera. So putting that in the hands of users, being able to do that in a self-service model, works for us very well. So basically, take out the help desk. Basically, there's no need to create a ticket for that. There's no need. Let's automate all that stuff, kind of, right? So that the users are in control. And then what we recently announced is that it's not just you have to come to our system necessarily, but if you work in Slack or in Microsoft Teams, you can interact with our systems now through these channels, right? So we want to meet the customer where they work. Especially the younger generation that I noticed. I mean, if you send them an email, they don't respond, but if you send them a Slack message, you get instant response,
It's the response.
right?
Yeah.
If you will. So having, these kind of capabilities available for people is just great, kind of. And we see a great adoption. In the time that we announced it a couple of weeks ago, we see already great adoption for these tools to interact with our capabilities. So that's good. As far as success stories, there's probably too many to mention. We have a whole dedicated page on our SailPoint.com about success stories. They each have their individual challenges, kind of. For most, it's what I hear more and more. It's really helping people to just get that visibility is probably the number one thing that we hear from our customers.
Is it fair to say, though, that it works for both smaller organizations as well as like huge enterprises?
Absolutely, kind of the technology scales either way, kind of, if you will. And people like to keep it simple. I mean, if I look back on my days when I did the on-premise solution, it was highly customizable. But as you well know, with highly customizations, if you get upgrades and new versions and whatever, then it becomes a problem.
Very painful, yeah.
If all that software is still supported and whatever, and did we really need all that customization? Kind of, if you will. So we see customers now that started with on-prem, they sort of start building now a hybrid model where they start doing some things in the cloud and still on-prem, but we also see people making that switch. So, and for small customers, why would you maintain all that kind of? I always said the cloud is for lazy people. You don't have to do too much, kind of, if you will. So I'm lazy in that respect. So, having that capability available in the cloud, a lot of our customers really like that you don't have to deal with the upgrades anymore and everything like that. So yeah, that's been really successful. We recently announced a whole developer community. So we opened it up to the whole developer world as well. So now people can build on top of that platform and build their own solutions on top of our platform. So that opens up another world for us completely.
Gotcha. Well, obviously we've covered quite a bit. Great stuff. Very interesting. But for our audience, if they need to, can you kind of lay out two things that you'd want them to remember from our discussion, or two things that they need to know about identity governance? Because obviously, hopefully, some of the people in the audience are familiar with this and may want to make a decision in the near future about their identity governance.
Yeah, I mean, two things. One is, this is a journey, not a destination, as they say.
Right.
This is definitely, a long journey. But what I say always is define small steps and celebrate success often. Kind of, so don't try to boil the ocean, but take small steps in your IGA journey. So whether it's what I used to call birthrights, so everybody needs an email account. Everybody may need an Active Directory account. Organize that first, that you automate that and you offboard those accounts nicely, and then start taking the more critical applications. Take small steps before you get it. I mean, there's constant change going on in your organization, so you're never done. I mean, people buy new solutions, especially with other SaaS solutions. There's constantly things going on that you need to integrate. So you're never done, if you will, and there's always new features coming out. So it is definitely a journey, but it's a good journey, kind of. You really see the business value coming, kind of, when people are happy that they have their access. There's nothing better that you can do. I remember in one of my last companies, kind of, they actually asked me to slow it down. I was going too fast, so that was kind of nice, kind of, when you hear that. Secondly, I mean, one thing that I would like to urge, other customers or prospects or whatever, is to really push the vendor community for adopting open standards. So there is this standard out there which helps with provisioning and other kinds of capability called SCIM, but we see very slow adoption in organizations to really adopt that. So there's many SaaS solutions out there that don't support it, have private APIs to do provisioning, or they have no APIs whatsoever. So you may want to automate your stuff, but if there's no API to interact with, or some kind of open standard to help you. So as part of our procurement, or in the past, we made sure that vendors committed to those open standards and that they were implemented. Maybe not day one, but at least have some commitment to it, because ultimately it will make your IGA journey easier if you can use these open standards that are supported by multiple vendors. So those are probably my two big things I would like to leave people with.
Sounds like simplify and automate with SailPoint.
Yes, absolutely. That's what we want to hear.
There was a theme throughout our conversation and your responses. And I think that's what a lot of people are looking for, right? Because I'm out talking about cybersecurity with folks all the time. And I always say the same thing. I say it is not a destination, it is a journey. So set expectations accordingly for everybody, including those that hold the purse strings. those that are actually working on it, and those that are going to reap value from it. Because you're exactly right. And I think that's one of the biggest things that people have had to overcome, especially during the pandemic, is all of a sudden, you increased your attack surface, you had more threat vectors, you had a completely different workplace. You had to worry about people's homes and their Wi-Fi. And there was the only thing you could do was simplify and automate to get there. I mean, there was, if you aggregate those into kind of themes, and it's interesting. Well, that's great stuff. Good.
It is an interesting space indeed, kind of, and continue to see innovations there. So that's good stuff.
Well, fantastic. Well, Paul, I want to thank you for joining me today. This has been really, really good. I think our audience is going to get a lot out of this, especially those that are looking at their identity stack and really trying to think about what they need to do around identity governance and doing it and realizing a lot of value for whatever they put out there. But I want to thank you for joining me, and we will see you in the future.
All right. Well, it was a pleasure, and good luck.
Thank you, Paul.